خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. The only reason that Allah created jinn and ins is so that we would worship Allah. Now, how does worship look like? That's expansive. When I was in college, I listened to a lecture called The Ideal Muslimah. I was 19, I wasn't married, I wasn't a mother, and I was very excited about figuring out how I can be the ideal Muslim woman. And the entire hour lecture was talking about how to be an ideal wife. And becoming an ideal wife and becoming an ideal mother are very powerful, beautiful, wonderful things to become. But that lecture should have been titled, How to Become the Ideal Muslimah Wife. And when we don't put those nuances in our discussion of what it means to be the ideal Muslimah, the message that we hear is your number one role in life is to be a wife and a mother. I, alhamdulillah, am very blessed to be a wife and very blessed to be a mother. And I know I'm very privileged to say that that's a blessing. Because I know people are struggling to get married. People are struggling in their marriages. People are struggling out of being married. I know people are struggling with being parents, with infertility. I know that those are privileges that I say that. At the same time, despite the fact that those are privileges, like I'm saying this from a privileged position, it's important to recognize that your worth is not defined by your relationship status or your motherhood status. And on a spiritual level, the reason why it's important to clarify this is because so many women have spoken with me about not being in a relationship, about not having children, or being in one and being very unhappy, or struggling with the fact that they're mothers, and feeling like somehow that affects their relationship with Allah. Somehow that brings their level of piety lower. Have you ever felt like your place in our community had to do with your status, your relationship status, your motherhood status? So many of you are nodding your heads. When in reality, it depends on your situation, how you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, wifehood and motherhood are beautiful, are highly encouraged sunan. It is highly encouraged to get married if it's the right situation. It's highly encouraged to have children. But that doesn't mean that's your only path to Allah. Sheikh Akram Nadawi talks about over 8,000 female muhaddithat, women hadith scholars. And he says that every single one of them, if they were able to fulfill their obligations in their family home, if they were married and had kids, they also continued their studies and they also taught. And they taught men and women. So even if this is your number one role right now, I know sometimes, and we're focusing specifically on motherhood and wifehood right now, but I know sometimes as a mother, you feel like that's all that defines you, your children. And then when they leave the house, you don't know what to do. That's all you've invested your time in. May Allah bless you. That's a huge sacrifice for your entire life. 20 years of your life, it's a huge sacrifice. And it's hard to say, also study Islam, also memorize Quran, also go out and do this. We don't value the immense sacrifice that you put into being a mom and into maintaining a household. The Prophet ﷺ told us that we're all responsible for our flocks like a shepherd. And if you have a household, if you're married, if you have kids, those are your responsibilities. Absolutely. I, alhamdulillah, for the past 3 nights, I've slept 2 hours, not consecutively, the first 2. But alhamdulillah, I slept almost 4 last night, not consecutively. And when I think about the efforts of mothers who are doing this constantly, and then on top of that, to tell us, be something more, being a mother is enough. That is incredible. And when you're ready to do something different, this is Sheikh Akram's example of the muhaddithat. When you are ready for something different too, the muhaddithat are examples of women who did something different too. When you're in a relationship, it is you and your husband who work together to decide how you're going to maintain your household. That is within the Islamic priorities. You have that discussion together, and you work together as a unit. But moving beyond the discussion of wifehood and motherhood, there are so many women in Islamic history who've shown us different ways of worshiping Allah. Let's talk about specifically in the society of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Give me a name of a female companion that comes to your mind right away. Aisha radiallahu anha. Okay, we'll start with Aisha radiallahu anha. We'll go to Khadija radiallahu anha. Aisha radiallahu anha, we know that she was married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Was she a mother? She was never a mother. She was a scholar in medicine. She was a scholar in lineage. She was a scholar of Islam. And when the Battle of the Camel happened, she was the head of an army. Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi mentions that she regretted her stance because she was on the wrong side politically. But she didn't regret going out and being the leader of an army. When we talk about Khadija radiallahu anha, she was married radiallahu anha. She was a mother. And she was also a businesswoman. Different aspects of her life became the identity of who she was. And it's important for us to recognize that she was a businesswoman before she was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, and before she was a mother. And it's okay for her career to have defined who she was, and she used all of that, all of the money that she had to support the message of Islam, and to support her husband when she was married, and he came with the message, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we look at someone who fought in a battle, who was in Uhud with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to his left, to his right, who comes to mind in terms of a female sahabiya? Safiya. Yes, Atiyah. We're talking about Nusayba radiallahu anha. But that wasn't the only battle that she was in with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was in multiple battles. She lost her hand or her arm, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then she became someone with a special ability. Because special ability Muslims are leaders in our community, in our history. Excuse me. When we talk about Atiyah Nusayba radiallahu anha, she was also a mother. But that's not the first description that comes to our mind when we think about Atiyah Nusayba radiallahu anha. Because she also had a different capacity which she served the ummah. Not that her motherhood wasn't enough, but when she was ready, she did something else too. I want to highlight this particular nuance because I grew up hearing in my community that my greatest goals in life should be wifehood and motherhood. And so many of you have too. And it's important for us to recognize that that's not necessarily an Islamic narrative. As in, there's nothing in the Quran that states you must become a mother, you must get married. That's very different from something that's highly encouraged, a highly encouraged sunnah, which we want to follow out of our love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Does that clarification make sense? Does it make a difference when you know that distinction? It makes a difference. Spiritually, it makes a difference. When we see in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have Khansa. She was a poet, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised her poetry. Rufayda al-Aslamiyya. Rufayda was a surgeon in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sa'ad ibn Mu'ad, who's a great companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was injured, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam put her in charge of his care because he wanted the best, and she was the best at what she did. When we look at examples in the time of the Prophet ﷺ of women who excelled in their worship, there was a woman who was a wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Salama, as mentioned by Ibn Hajar. This is a narration in Bukhari. We often hear that it's better for a woman to pray in her home, and that's where she's going to get more rewards. There are narrations that specify this, but there are hundreds of narrations that talk about some of the female companions who would go for every salah. The encouragement of the female companions to come out on Eid, to pray janazah, to pray Jumu'ah. We have narrations of women who talked about when, at Masjid Quba, when the Qibla was changed from one direction to the next. What happened? There was a female companion who talked about how the women's rows moved over and switched with the men's rows. That's because women were present in all of these situations. Women were present in the Muslim community, in the Muslim society, in the masajid. And when we talk about going to the masjid and being our space, we look at Salama radiallahu anha, who used to have istihada. Istihada is a type of bleeding that's not your period. So we have certain rules relating salah in your period. Istihada is a different type of blood. It comes at a different time that's not your period blood. It doesn't affect whether or not you can do salah, for example. So Salama radiallahu anha, she used to pray in the Prophet's masjid, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is in Bukhari. Now, there was no barrier between the men and the women in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam in his masjid. So if you're entering the masjid and you look back and you see the women's section, you're going to see women there praying. If you're a man entering the masjid, to clarify. So Salama used to have istihada, and they didn't have like pads and stuff like we do today. So what she would do is she would have put a tray underneath her, so that when she was praying, it would catch the blood and it wouldn't get on the floor of the masjid. Now this is an authentic narration, and Ibn Hajar, which is an authentic source, talks about and describes it. This is her dedication to the masjid, her dedication to being a part of the Muslim community and a part of the worship of the Muslim community. But these are the narrations that we're not often exposed to. And when we're not exposed to these women who went out of their way to be a part of society, who are critical for the way that society changed, when we don't make that a part of our normal conversation, all we hear is, you religiously, in the eyes of Allah, are only connected to your relationship status or your motherhood status. Super important, but not the only things that define us. Are you with me? Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Well, if you disagreed with me, you don't have a platform. I'm on the stage, I have the mic. I'm in power of privilege. It's really difficult. This is privilege. It's okay to disagree. This is a very emotional topic in our community, and that's okay. But what's important for us is to recognize that just as we are so different, the women in the time of the Prophet ﷺ were very different too. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were women who were part of the political process, who made bay'ah with the Prophet ﷺ, who Shifa bint Abdullah, who Umar radiallahu anh put in charge of the marketplace. These are women who show us all different aspects of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we are trying to figure out what our roles are, when we are told messages of it being better for us not to be out in society, for it to be better for us not to be involved, remember their examples. These are women who showed us what it looked like to be on the battlefield, what it looked like to pray in the masjid even with blood coming out, what it looked like to be a part of the prophetic society, and what it looked like to be our role models today in America, where we can actually channel their examples. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your children if you are mothers. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your non-children if you're not. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of you to seek what you're seeking and make it better than what you're seeking because it's for His sake. Jazakumullah khair.